In today's lecture, we will be looking at higher order linear ordinary differential equations. So, in the previous lecture, we had looked into first order linear differential equations and the various methods which were used to solve such differential equations. Now, we will be upping the ante a bit and introducing a newer version, which is the higher order linear ordinary differential equations. So, before I proceed on how to solve them and what are their properties, let us first have an exposition on the forms. So the first important form is a homogeneous higher order ordinary differential equation. So let me write what is the general form of such an ordinary differential equation. So this is what homogeneous higher order ODE means. What is the meaning of homogeneous? Basically, if the final end term is 0, if there is a 0 in the right hand side of the equal to of the equation, then it is called homogeneous. It's good to keep in mind this small principle. What does this mean? This is the nth derivative of y, this is the n minus 1th derivative of y, and so on. So what you can say is that it is a combination of all the derivatives of y from n all the way till the 0th derivative, which this is y, by the way. Yeah, a n y is equal to 0. So this is the homogeneous higher order ordinary differential equation. And what are a1, a2 all the way till an? This set of functions here, this set of functions are the independent variable, means they are functions of x. So we have to find the solution, which is y. So y equal to some function of x, we have to find the explicit solution to homogeneous higher order differential equation. At least that is our goal. Well, to put it straight, it's not possible to solve, in general it is not possible to solve a higher order differential equation, especially if it's homogeneous, because of this general constraint here that these functions need to be functions of x. This general constraint is normally not solvable, which is why, again, like the previous thing which we looked into, we have to look into special forms, and I will delve into all the special forms which are considered for undergraduate course of study in this lecture. But I will not be looking into the proofs of how to solve these, nor will I be looking into some advanced technique such as the normal form of writing a higher order differential equation. In the next lecture, we will be looking into these, and this is an optional lecture. If you would like to view it, I will post it. So this was a homogeneous higher order differential equation. This is a general form of such a differential equation. But as I said earlier, you cannot solve it in general. So there are some special forms. I'll look into them in the next slides. So the first special form which we'll be looking into is a homogeneous higher order differential equation with constant coefficients. So what does this mean? Let me rewrite the equation. Once again, you can see that it looks like the same equation, but there is one major difference. The difference is in a1, a2 all the way till an. In the general form, these were functions of x, but in the special form, these are just constants. Now, if these coefficients of the nth derivative, the n minus 1th derivative, and so on, if these constants are, if these coefficients are constant, like in this form, if they are constant, then the solution can always be found. So there is no question of not finding the solution. There is a general method by which you can find the solution, and I will show you this general method how to find the solution in the later slides. But before we get into finding the solution, we need to look into the properties of such this special form, because only if we look into the properties will we understand how the solution is obtained and what to do to obtain the solution. So the first property of a homogeneous higher order ODE with constant coefficients is the property of its uniqueness of solution. So just let me erase this. So let's say we were able to isolate some solutions for the differential equation, and those solutions are y1, y2, y3 all the way till yn. So if you plugged this y1 into that equation, you will get 0. If you plug this y2 into the equation, you will get 0, y3, yn, and so on. If you differentiate them and do all the math, you would get 0. Okay, now first question you might ask is, why are there n solutions? Well, as we know, y can be differentiated n times, and each differentiation will give us some kind of constant. When you integrate it on the other end, you would get a constant. So there are n such solutions which you can find, which are unique solutions and which are independent, linearly independent solutions. I'll go into what linearly independent means, but for the time being, know that there can be n isolated solutions of a homogeneous higher order differential equation. Now, the first property is that the general solution of a higher order ODE with constant coefficients, or for that matter which is not, doesn't necessarily to have to be constant coefficients either. If we have found these n isolated solutions, the final solution is a linear combination of these solutions. So what does linear combination mean? If we have two numbers, say two variables, say a and b, then the linear combination of these two variables is some constant times a plus some constant times b, some arbitrary constant. This is the linear combination. Similarly, in this case, if there are n such solutions, then the linear combination of these solutions c1 y1 c2 y2 up to cn yn, where c1 c2 up to cn are arbitrary constants. So that's the first property. It's quite simple to prove this, but as I said earlier, I will not be proving any properties. In the next lecture, you can look at the proof which I will demonstrate. So that was the first property, and it's good to keep this property in mind, since it's always expected of the undergraduate course studier to write in the general solution c1 y1 plus c2 y2 all the way till c1 cn yn. Then the second property which we will be looking into is the property of the linear independence. So again, if we found n, okay, let's not say that they are solutions. Let's say we have some n arbitrary functions, and these functions are with respect to x. So they are all defined under x itself. X is defined in integers. Integers is a subset of the real set. So this has to be kept in mind. It's always defined in this manner. So we have some n functions. We need to define what linear independence means. So linear independence basically means that, let's say instead of n functions we have two functions. Then if one function is not some constant times the other function, if it is some constant times the other function, then you call them linearly dependent. Linearly dependent means one function is dependent on the other function only by a constant. So linear means times a constant, or you can say proportional, that these two functions are proportional. If however that there are three functions y1 y2 y3, let's assume, then if y1 proportional to y2, y2 proportional to y3 and y1 proportional to y3, then these functions are linearly dependent again. Similarly, you can extend this to n such functions. If all of these functions are proportional to one another in pairwise, then they are linearly dependent. But as you might see yourself, it's very difficult to gauge linear dependence for more than two functions. Y1 proportional to y2 we can see, but after that it's not easy to see. So we define a function which is called the Wronskian. The Wronskian of some n functions, if the Wronskian of n functions is not equal to 0, then we call these linearly independent. If the Wronskian of some n functions which we defined is not equal to 0, then these n functions are linearly independent. So the question arises as to what exactly is a Wronskian. So let me demonstrate with two variables. Let's say we want to find the Wronskian of y1 and y2. Then the Wronskian of y1 and y2 is the determinant of this matrix. You write y1 and y2 in the first row, then you write the first differential of y1 and the first differential of y2 in the second row. So this is the Wronskian, the determinant of this. If you wanted three variables, then the Wronskian is a 3 cross 3 matrix, y1 y2 y3, y1 prime y2 prime y3 prime, y1 double prime y2 double prime and y3 double prime. This is Wronskian of three functions, and you can see how it extends to n functions. So again to recap, the first property is if we find n solutions to a homogeneous higher order ODE, then the general solution is linear combination of those n solutions. For n functions to be linearly independent, the Wronskian of those functions should not be equal to 0. So that is two properties. Now the third property is about the Wronskian. This is not necessary to keep in mind, but I will still mention it. If the Wronskian is 0 at some point for some x, if I write it in mathematical terms, if there exists x belonging to I subset R such that the Wronskian of these n functions is equal to 0, then for all x existing in that range, the Wronskian is equal to 0. In other words, if it is 0 at some place, then it is 0 at every place. Similarly, if it's not 0 at some place, then it's not 0 at every place. So this is a property of the Wronskian, and this property gives rise to special formula. I will not look into this formula in this lecture. We'll look into it in the next lecture. So now as we have done, we have listed out the properties of homogeneous higher order differential equation with the constant coefficients. Let me write them out again. If we have y1, y2 up till yn as isolated solutions, then c1 y1 plus c2 y2 cn yn is the general solution. Second property, if the Wronskian of some n functions is not equal to 0, then these n functions are linearly independent. Third property, if there exists x belonging to I such that Wronskian is equal to 0, then Wronskian is equal to 0 for all x belonging to I. So this is the third property. So now we looked into the property of higher order differential equations of constant coefficients, but just to keep in mind, these properties are applicable to variable coefficients as well. As you saw, there is no constraint on variable coefficient, means even if the coefficients are functions of x, this is valid. So just keeping that in mind. The next important case which we look into how to solve homogeneous ODE with constant coefficients. So there is one overarching general method to solve a homogeneous ODE, and it is applicable for all homogeneous ODEs. Let's write the general form first. Y of nth derivative a y minus 1 a n y is equal to 0. This is general form. How to find the solution to this homogeneous ODE, you might ask. Well, let's see. We have looked into first order ODEs, haven't we? So let's just say that we want to look into this general form. We want to look at a special case. Let's take n is equal to 1 as a special case. So what would you say happens when you take n is equal to 1? You get y prime plus a1 y 0th derivative means just a1 y, right? A n y means a1 y is equal to 0. Now this is a very simple one. We've already solved this. Y prime plus a1 y equal to 0 means dy by dx is equal to minus a1 y. Take that to the other side, take y bottom, log y is equal to minus ax, and y is equal to e to the power minus ax, something like this. So we get a solution as this. We won't consider the constant, we only want a particular solution. Like I said earlier, we find n solutions and then we consider the constants for them. So we are not looking into constants of this integral. Some particular solution is fine for us when it is y equal to this. Then we find the linear combination and add our constants there. So if n equal to 1 is giving us some equation of this form, and I told you already that there will be n like these, like if you have nth derivative there will be n such solutions, y1, y2, y3, then we can say that y1, y2, y3, all of them will follow the same style, means the same way of how the equation is shown, e to the power some constant times x. So we make an ansatz or a guess, which it's called ansatz. We make an ansatz that all the solutions, the set of all solutions y1, y2, yn is equal to some e to the power lambda x. Lambda also is a set. Lambda is a set of all numbers lambda 1, lambda 2 up till lambda n. So this is a set of some numbers, and the solutions are e raised to those numbers times x. So that means y1 is e to the power lambda 1 x, y2 is e to the power lambda 2 x, yn is equal to e to the power lambda n x. So we assume, we make this assumption of the ansatz that all the solutions, isolated solutions, are in this form. So if we make this assumption, let's call that set, final set, y equal to e to the power lambda x, means this set is y now. So we have like a vector of these solutions over here, e lambda x and so on, like that. So we input that in our general equation. So that is saying yn a1 yn minus 1 up till an is equal to 0, an y is equal to 0. Now y nth derivative, what is the nth derivative of e to the power lambda x? Nth derivative of e power lambda x is simply lambda to the power n e to the power lambda x. Let me just clear this screen. So we make ansatz that y is equal to e to the power lambda x. Then first derivative of y is lambda e to the power lambda x. Second derivative of y is lambda square e to the power lambda x. Nth derivative is lambda power n e to the power lambda x. It's very simple, just differentiate e power lambda x n times, you get lambda to power n e power lambda x. Now we input these into that equation which I showed. a1 y to the power n is lambda power n e to the power lambda x plus a2 lambda power n minus lambda power n minus 2 e power lambda x. Let's write it like lambda x all the way till an lambda an e to the power lambda x equal to 0. As you can see here, we can remove e power lambda x out everywhere. E to the power lambda x you take out, you get a1 lambda power n, a2 lambda power n minus 1, this is n minus 1, all the way up till an is equal to 0. So this is a very significant equation here. This equation is called the auxiliary equation or the characteristic equation. Auxiliary equation or characteristic equation. So what is done in most textbooks? What is done in most textbooks when we use auxiliary equation? Instead of using the lambda, we replace that lambda with some d. We use what is called the annihilator. So what is an annihilator or a differential operator? It's a way of shortening the differential equation procedure using the same idea. The derivative operator, which is dy by dx, is shortened to d. That means d square y by dx square is simply written as d square, and the nth derivative yn is written as d power n. This allows us to play with differential equations like polynomial equations. So I explained the derivation of an annihilator, how we can use, but now let's just write it out like an annihilator equation directly. So what is the general form of a homogeneous ODE with constant coefficient? Very simple. I'm sure you can write it out now with ease. So I derived how you get this characteristic equation. Now let's write out in this annihilator form. we write like this: d power n plus a1 d power n minus 1 all the way up till a n times y is equal to 0. This is the same way as writing that, because we assumed y is equal to e power lambda x, and that is the same thing here, and d is our lambda itself. So it is just an inverted way of writing it, where d is now dy by dx and y is just operator x, means we are operating it with respect to x. So this is the annihilator form or the characteristic form. This is called auxiliary equation, like the previous one, or characteristic equation. So we've cleared that up. How to rewrite a homogeneous ODE with constant coefficients in the annihilator form. Sorry, this is 1, this is 2, this is n is equal to 0. Okay, n, wait, so how we rewrite it? We write it like this: an times y is equal to 0. Now this is a polynomial function in D, isn't it? So a polynomial function in D can have at most, since the nth power, it can have at most n solutions, n distinct solutions at most, and it is possible for repeated roots as well. So that's why we have three cases. The case one is if the roots, which is D, if the set of all solutions d1 d2 up till dn, if they are distinct and real, then this is the first case. If they are distinct and real, what we are going to do? Let's look at it from the previous way we solved the we had rewritten, not in this annihilator form: e power lambda x a1 lambda power n a2 lambda power n minus 1 all the way till an is equal to 0. So now we will get some lambdas. We will get lambda 1 is equal to something, so we get solutions lambda 1 lambda 2 lambda n, don't we? So we get the solutions: y is equal to y1 is equal to e power lambda 1x, y2 is equal to e power lambda 2x, yn is equal to e power lambda nx. So if we have n distinct and real solutions, if all the solutions are real and distinct, then their solutions are simply e to power lambda 1x, e to power lambda 2x, e power lambda nx, and so on. Or you can write e power d1x, e power d2x in the annihilator form. It doesn't matter which form you write, the solution will come the same. You have to solve the polynomial equation, get its roots. If they are distinct and real, your isolated solutions are e power lambda 1x, lambda 2x, and lambda nx. So you get the isolated solutions. Then we use property 1, which says that it's just a linear combination of isolated solutions, which means c1 e power lambda 1x, c2 e power lambda 2x, cn, add them all, cn e power lambda nx. So that is basically it. This is how you solve the case 1, where the roots of this auxiliary equation are distinct and real, and all of them are unequal and they belong to real numbers. Then the solution is c1 e power lambda 1x, c2 e power lambda 2x, cn e power lambda nx, where lambda 1 lambda 2 up to lambda n are the roots of the auxiliary equation. That's case 1. Case 2, if for some reason the auxiliary equation is having roots which are equal, some roots are equal, all roots are equal, we don't know. So if there are n roots and k of them are equal, let's assume k roots are equal and there are n, or we can even look into this consideration that n roots are there and there are some m tuples of k equal roots. Basically, what does that mean? If there are, say, 5 roots and there are 2 tuples of 2 roots which are equal, 2 equal roots, which means 2 pairs of equal roots. Say we have a, b, c, d, e, a is equal to b, c is equal to d. So 2 tuples of 2 equal roots, So we consider that is m tuples. So if we consider, if we had k equal to roots, it doesn't need to be k, it can be any different numbers also. So m tuples of some equal roots k1, k2, km, then it's pretty sure that k1 plus k2 all the way till km is equal to n. If this is the case, then there is a formula which is used, which is called Abel's formula, which helps us to find the other solutions. I will not look into Abel's formula, that's reserved for the next lecture. But how are the solutions written? I will show you that. It's very simple. Let's say that we have lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n are our solutions, and in that lambda uh, lambda 1 to k are equal, let's say, where k is less than n. There's one set of equal roots, lambda 1 to k are equal roots and k is less than n. Then how do we write the solution? So we cannot write it like this. We cannot write c1 e to the power lambda 1x plus c2 e power lambda 2x. We cannot write, because it's like just adding them up. Because if lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2 up to lambda k, that's like adding them up, and when you add them up, all you get is another arbitrary constant. So you will not get any unique solutions. So there is a different way of writing it. It's like this. If there are k solutions, then what we do is we consider multiplicity. c1 e power lambda 1x is our first. Now we know lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2 all the way up till lambda k, and k is less than n, strictly less than n. So c1 e power lambda 1x plus x c2 e power lambda 2x plus x square c3 e power lambda 3x all the way up till x k minus 1 e to the power lambda kx. So this is how we write the solution for those k roots. For those k equal roots, c1 e power lambda 1x, x c2 e power lambda 2x, x square c3 e power lambda 3x, and so on. I will better explain this from an example. Let's consider a third order ODE. Let's look into that. Let's reconstruct an equation. Say we have 2 comma 2 and 3. So we have something like this. So x minus 2, or let's say d minus 2 squared times d minus 3 is equal to d squared minus 4d plus 4 times d minus 3, which is equal to d cubed minus or you know what, leave it. So we have d minus 2 the whole square into d minus 3 y is equal to 0. This is our auxiliary, our differential equation, and our solutions which we get are 2 comma 2 comma 3. So the first 3, which is different, we can directly write c3 e to the power 3x plus one solution we can write as c1 e power 2x. But the second solution c2 e power 2x we cannot write. This is wrong. So what we do is we write, multiply by some x and then write it. So how do we rewrite it? c3 e power 3x plus e power 2x into c1 plus x c2, or x c2. This is the general solution. This is the general solution to this equation which we wrote. This differential equation with constant coefficients, this is the general solution. We multiplied it by x. Like that, if it was 2 comma 2 comma 2 comma 3, we would add one extra term which is signified x squared e power 4 2x. If there was one more, it would be x cube, one more x power 4. So like that, we keep adding the powers of x times whatever that is, that constant, into e power 2x, and we would write the final general solution like that. So that's how Abel's formula is used. Abel's formula is used to derive this method, but I won't look into that. So that was a second case. Now the third case of solutions is an interesting case. If you solve the set of equations, if you solve this polynomial equation and you get some complex conjugate roots. So as we know very well, complex roots must always come in pairs. So a set of roots must always be of the form, so if we say x is the real part of x plus imaginary part of x, and the other root must always be minus that. In other words, a complex conjugate. If z is one root, then z bar must be another root. So it must come in pairs. This comes from the theorem, the fundamental theorem of algebra. The fundamental theorem of algebra says that imaginary or complex roots must always come in conjugate pairs. So if that is the case, then we can always write it in the same form. That no one is stopping you from writing it in e to the power lambda 1x c1 e power lambda 1x c2 e power lambda 2x, but it is better to write it in using Euler's conversion. We know e to the power ix is equal to r sine I r times cos ix minus sine ix. This fundamental Euler formula which we know very well. So we can always rewrite it like that. R is the real part, this is the imaginary part, this is the imaginary part. So let's say we got a solution a plus ib. Let's say one of our solutions z was a plus ib, then obviously the other solution is a minus ib. If there were conjugate pair of solutions, then the solution can be written as real part e to the power real part of this, so eax times c1 cos of imaginary part minus sine of negative of the imaginary part. What is the it depends on the imaginary part. If the imaginary part is positive or negative, then we get the solution basically based on that. So in this case a minus ib, so here imaginary part negative, this is also negative, so this is c2, so this is the final solution. So basically how we can rewrite it as e to the power real part of the complex number times c1 cos imaginary part of the complex number plus minus sine of imaginary part of the complex number. This is the form if there is a conjugate set of conjugate pair. This is for one conjugate pair. If there is another conjugate pair, then add it using superposition. Superposition means that in isolated solutions, so end solutions must always be just added up, linear combination. So the next solution is the next conjugate reformation of this real part of z, imaginary part, the same thing, just in the next conjugate pair and the next conjugate pair, depending on how many conjugate pairs are there. So we isolate the conjugate pairs, write it in this form. So that was case 3 of homogeneous ODE with constant coefficients, and what can be considered as the most important case here. Quite a bit of problems comes from this constant coefficients case. Then now the next important set, which I would have delved into earlier but I did not because we needed to cover constant coefficients first, is Cauchy-Euler equations. It's a special form of homogeneous ODE. It is not a constant coefficient homogeneous ODE, it is variable coefficient, but those variables are special variables. So let me write the general form, a2 y power n minus 1 and so on up till a n y is equal to 0. So this set a1 a2 a3, they are like this. A1 must be equal to some x to the power m, a2 must be equal to x to the power m minus 1, a3 must be equal to x to the power m minus 2, and so on. An must be equal to x nothing, an must be equal to x to the power this must be n, it must be the same. Basically it must be the same power as whatever is the derivative power. A n must be equal to x power n minus n, which is nothing, 0, 1. So that is the basic property of Cauchy-Euler equations. This is a special form and this must be the form, and if it is in this form, then it is possible to solve any Cauchy-Euler equation which is in this form. Let me show you. Let me rewrite it in that form first. X to the power n y n plus x to the power n minus 1 y n minus 1 all the way up till a, all the way up till y is equal to 0. So this is the form. We perform a substitution. We assume that t is equal to some ln x. The first assumption which we make is t equal to some ln x. We put a substitution. Then y is equal to some g of x. If y is equal to some g of x, then it must be equal to some phi of t, because g of x is equal to g of e power t, which is equal to phi of t. So we assume that y is equal to phi of t, because it's true, it's absolutely possible. If the domain is conserved, which it always is, then g of e power t is some phi of t which is closed in the entire domain which we have, and thus y can be written as some phi of t. So let's write y as some phi of t. Then y prime is equal to phi prime of t divided by t, and this is the first thing. Now because it is quite complex, it is not complex, it is pretty difficult to write the nth derivative form. We will consider only for second order derivative. So second order derivative, x square y double dot x y dot plus y is equal to 0. X square y double prime x y prime plus y equal to 0. We are solving this equation using our substitution. T is equal to ln x. So y prime is equal to, y is equal to phi of t, y prime equal to phi prime of t by x. This is x. It makes sense. So y double prime is equal to 1 by x squared phi of t minus phi double prime of t minus phi prime of t. This calculation you can do, it's a pretty simple calculation. So we have y prime equal to phi prime of t by x, y double prime equal to 1 by x square phi double prime t minus phi prime t, whatever. So these two are preserved. I'll erase the rest here. Where is this? Here I'll erase this. And we know t is equal to ln x. Let's now replace it into, let's rewrite this equation. N is equal to 2, second order. So x square y double dot x y dot plus y is equal to 0. Let's replace it. So we get x square divided by x square t minus t plus x divided by x phi prime of t plus y is equal to 0. This will cancel, then these two will cancel. So all we are left with phi prime of t plus y is equal to 0, and phi prime double prime of t plus y is equal to 0 we obtain. Of course, in this manner it is possible to solve the problem, because as we know y is equal to phi of t. So phi prime of t plus phi of t is equal to 0. Also Cauchy-Euler equations are like, we can add a constant. So if this is C1, this is C2, this is C3, this is allowed, this is definitely allowed. So what we will get then, we will get basis C1 over here, we can subtract them and we can cancel out these things and we'll still be getting the same solution. Let me write it that way because it's more general. I don't want to write a special solution. So let's assume that there are some constants C1, C2, C3 here. Then our solution will be C1 phi prime prime of we will get something phi prime prime t minus phi, wait a minute, phi prime prime t minus phi prime t plus C2 phi prime t plus C3 phi t, C3 phi t is equal to 0. If we separate these things, C prime prime t C1 plus C2 minus C1 phi prime of t plus C3 phi t is equal to 0. Now what is the issue here? This is our new equation. This is the reduced equation after we did our substitution for Cauchy-Euler. We get C1 phi double prime t plus C2 minus C1 phi prime t plus C3 phi prime t equal to 0, where C1, C2, C3 are the constants. So this is very simple now. This is in the form of second order ODE with constant coefficients. These are constants, and this is a ODE. solve it using the method which was previously discussed, and we obtain the solution. Then replace t equal to ln x and we obtain the general solution. So with that we dealt with Cauchy-Euler equation as a special form. Next we move on to non-homogeneous higher order ordinary differential equations. So what is a non-homogeneous? Let's say we have a1 y power n, not power, derivative, a2 y n minus 1 a n y equal to, when it was homogeneous it was 0, when it is non-homogeneous it is some function of x. So some general function of x, then it becomes non-homogeneous higher order ODE. Now again we don't know how to solve a non-homogeneous higher order ODE if this is so general. So we look at some special forms, and our special forms are again the same thing. We can solve a Cauchy-Euler form of non-homogeneous higher order, and we can solve constant coefficients form of non-homogeneous higher order, and we can also convert to normal form and solve some non-homogeneous higher order, that is also possible. But the question arises now, we can solve a homogeneous form of these things, but how to solve the non-homogeneous form when this is not 0? So that is the main question which comes, and we look into this question, how the solution to this equation is dealt with. So there are two parts to non-homogeneous solution. First there is the homogeneous part. Homogeneous part. What does a homogeneous part mean? Means if we consider that equation blah 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 equal to some f of x, this equation, if we neglected f of x, said the f of x doesn't exist and it is 0 instead, then we get some solution, right? We are able to solve it. If it is constant coefficient, we use the method and get some general solution. If it is Cauchy-Euler, we convert and get a general solution. Whatever it may be, if we can find a solution of the homogeneous equation, that solution is called the complementary solution. Complementary solution is the solution of the homogeneous equivalent of a non-homogeneous equation. Make it 0, make that function of x 0, find the complementary solution which is its solution, homogeneous part, and you have one part of the solution. Then there is a second part of the solution, and that second part is called the particular integral. We will look into how to solve for particular integrals. Particular integral is the part which we have to delve into, because we already know how to find complementary solutions, which is using the techniques which we have employed in the past for homogeneous higher order Ds with constant coefficients, or else Cauchy-Euler, or else normal form, or whatever it may be. You can even do some substitutions and find solutions to some. Particular integral is what we are interested in. So how to find the particular integral? The first technique to find the particular integral is a variation of parameters technique. So let us write the general form again. This is a general technique of finding what do I say? This is a general technique of finding the answer or the particular integral of using variation of parameters. A general technique means it can apply for any as long as it is a constant coefficient. Of course, we can only solve for constant coefficients or equations which are convertible to constant coefficients, because if they are not constant coefficients, then it is quite difficult to solve. Complementary solution is not possible anyway, so it's out of question to ask for particular integral. So these are constants till an is constant. That's the thing. So let's say this complementary solution was c1 e power lambda x, so c1 y1 plus c2 y2 cn yn. After solving the homogeneous type, we got y1 y2 yn, and then we did linear combination and we got c1 y1 c2 y2 cn yn. I'm pretty sure you know how to find these homogeneous part now after the previous slides. So I will directly write the complementary solution as cs equal to this. So when we use variation of parameters, we write particular integral as it is equal to this same thing as cs. Okay, means it is in the same it's written in the same manner, c1 y1 c2 y2 cn yn. But this time c1 c2 cn it's not, what can I say, it is not constant, it is function of x. Variation of parameter, what does it mean? We are varying values of x in order to get particular integral. We are varying some value of x to get particular integral. We want only one solution of particular integral, and then we attach that particular integral solution to CS. That's all we want. We don't want arbitrary solutions to particular integral. We vary the parameter in such a way that we get our solution to particular integral. So there is a long arduous process of defining and finding out how to solve particular integral, but to properly define it, to properly say how to solve, I will just write out the formula how it is written. What we are interested in, we are interested in these functions c1, c2, cn. If we can find c1, c2, cn, remember these are not the same as these are not the same. These are the constants which we found, which we don't care about. These are just arbitrary constants. These are functions which we need to find. So just remember that these are arbitrary constants and these are functions which we need to find. Just to keep it in mind, I am writing it in the same form so that particular integral form is not forgotten in variation of parameters. So now how to find these? So the form of finding them is like this. C1 or say Cn itself, let's say some Ck where k is between 1 and n. Okay, so this is a general way of writing it. Ck is equal to negative integral of yk, means the kth solution written here. So there is some ck yk in middle here somewhere. So in some place it is there. That is ck yk times this function, this end function f of x, divided by the Wronskian of these solutions y1, y2 up till yn. So the Wronskian of the entire solution set of y, this is the kth function. That's it. So basically what we do, find the CS, we get the CS, write that CS form in the same way in particular integral y1, y2 we know, write that in that particular integral form c1, y1, c2, y2, but these are now constants. So I'll just write capital C to make it little less confusing. C1, y1, c2, y2, capital C, yt. So capital Ck, which is a function, is equal to negative integral kth solution, kth function, kth solution, times f of x, which is the end function here, divided by Wronskian y. So we know now, we can see that if this f of x were 0, if this is 0 and Wronskian is something, then the final answer is 0 and the Ck does not exist itself. So particular integral becomes 0. So easily we know now why non-homogeneous is merely a generalization of homogeneous. Homogeneous we find, we don't care about particular integral because particular integral becomes 0. But if f of x is not equal to 0, then particular integral has to be found using variation of parameters. It's a very simple procedure. It's just a formula, negative integral yk f of x divided by Wronskian of y. That is our formula for with variation of parameters. Do it for C1, then for C2, C3, Cn. Do it, write that full particular integral. Now we got the particular integral. What to do? After we got the particular integral, it's done. The problem is done because the complete solution, entire solution is equal to complementary solution plus particular integral. That's all. Very simple. Complete solution equal to complementary solution plus particular integral. Find the particular integral using the Wronskian formula. Find the complementary solution using the method. And using variation of parameters, you can find pretty much any non-homogeneous higher order ODE. Of course, there are some difficulties. If the Wronskian is equal to 0, then you cannot use variation of parameters. You have to use a different technique. I will show this different technique in the later slides. It is called method of undetermined coefficients. But if you do not know, if you find the Wronskian equal to 0, and I have shown already what Wronskian is, so there is no difficulty in finding the Wronskian. It's just a determinant of a matrix. So that's it about variation of parameters. What about method of undetermined coefficients? So now undetermined coefficient method is not as general as variation of parameters. Means we are isolating some special forms for the final end function. That function is not general now. F of x was general when we did variation of parameters, but f of x is not general when we are doing method of undetermined coefficient. Also, one thing I have to add, we notice ck is equal to minus integral yk f of x divided by Wronskian Wronskian. Now we know for a fact that all integrals are not solvable. We know that only certain integrals which have a special form or whatever, elliptical integrals are not solvable. Many integrals don't have closed solution. So if this is a general integral form, and obviously there will exist some f of x or some Wronskian, that it is not going to have closed form. So that means, that proves that not all homogeneous, non-homogeneous ODEs which are even if they are constant coefficients, all of them are not solvable. So that adds to our existence uniqueness theorem, that for finding unique solution, the solution must first exist, and solutions do not always exist in higher order ODEs. You have to keep that in mind. I'll prove the existence theorem in the next lecture. So form 1, what is our form 1? F of x is equal to f of x is equal to e to the power ax. This is the first form. If f of x is equal to e power ax, we define, let's first define, we can write a form, say yn minus yn plus a1 yn minus 1 all the way up till an equal to 0. So not 0, f of x, but f of x is e power ax. This is the first form. Then we can rewrite this as what? D power n plus a1 dn minus 1 up till an times y is equal to e power ax. So this is the annihilator equation, or the auxiliary equation, you can call it whatever. Let's call this equation is in terms of d, right? This polynomial equation, let's call it g of d. Okay, g of d. So g of d times y, let's write it like this, g of d times y is equal to e power ax. So y is equal to the solution e power ax by g of d. Okay, so now there's some nuances which you have to look into. We input d is equal to a. Okay, so d is equal to a. When you put, you get e power ax divided by g of a, where you replace all d with a. A is this. Now it is possible that g of a becomes 0. If g of a becomes 0, the solution is not possible. So there is a special rule, and let me write the mathematical form and then explain. The particular integral is equal to e to the power ax times x to the power n divided by nth derivative of d, where n is the smallest possible number, smallest whole number, such that g nth derivative of d is not equal to 0. So what does this mean? Say for example n equal to 1. If n equal to 1 is a small, not n equal to 1, n equal to 0, whole number, so 0 is possible. If n is equal to 0, that means it's g of d. If g of d is equal to 0, then n is not the smallest number such that g n of d not equal to 0. So we take the next, n equal to 2, g prime of d. If that also is equal to 0, then n is not the smallest number. So we have to take the next smallest number, which is n equal to 2. Even if that is equal to 0, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. So we have to keep taking and then multiplying by some power of x, this x power n operator, to keep multiplying until we get the smallest number such that this is not equal to 0. Most of the time it ends at 3 or 3. So at n equal to, when you differentiate for the third time or the second or third time, you will get not equal to 0. So there is no worries there. But sometimes you'll have to differentiate once or twice or thrice until you get not equal to 0. Once you hit that it's not equal to 0, then you write whatever that n is. So if n is equal to 2, when you get that not equal to 0, it becomes e power ax x square divided by g double dash of d. If n equal to 3, then it's something else, 4 something else. So that's the first form. If f of x is equal to e power ax, then the particular integral is this thing here. So keep this formula in mind. It's an important formula. Method of undetermined coefficients, you need to memorize the formulae of the various forms. This is the first form. The next form, form 2. Form 2, if f of x is equal to sine ax or cos ax, it can be sine or cos, no problems there, then the particular integral is equal to sine ax divided by that g of d. Like we write it like this, d square comma d is equal to, I mean this is the particular integral, and d square is equal to minus a square. So we write like everywhere we see d square, we put minus a square. So let me explain how it works. Let's say our auxiliary function is d cube plus 3d square plus d minus 4. This is our auxiliary equation. D cube can be written as d square into d. So this d square we make minus a square. So minus a square times d plus 3 minus 3a square minus 3a square plus d minus 4. What does this become? Minus a square plus 1 into d minus 3a square minus 4. Let's put a simple one. This is a bit complicated. So our form f of x equal to sine ax or cos ax. Same thing applies, exact same method applies to cos. P particular integral is sine ax divided by g of d square comma d. So what do I mean by that? Let's take d to the d cube minus d cube minus d. Let's take this. If it is d cube minus d, no, not that. Let's take d cube minus d square. D cube minus d square is g of d. Then this form, remember d square must be equal to minus a square. So what does this be? Minus a square d minus a square, right? Which is like writing minus a square into d plus 1. So p particular integral is equal to sine ax minus sine ax by a square into d plus 1. Of course, we cannot just leave it like this. So what we do, we multiply d plus 1, d minus 1 on both sides. Why do we do that? If we rationalize numerator and denominator, we will always get a power of 2 over here. And when we get power of 2, we can replace that d square as minus a square. Remember, this applies only to power of 2. So d square is minus a square, d power 4 minus a power 4, d power 6 minus a power 6, and so on. But d is not equal to minus a. This is not true. D square is equal to minus a square, but d is not equal to minus a. So that you have to keep in mind, because it is annihilator operator. You cannot reduce it, because remember the d square y by dx square. This is not d just a number. This is a differentiation. You can do it at a higher power but not at lower power. Anyway, let's rationalize the numerator and denominator. So d minus 1, so means if you take the negative, becomes 1 minus d. 1 minus d sine ax divided by a square into d square minus 1, but d square is just minus a square, so this becomes minus a square. Again we can take out minus 1 out, so this becomes d minus 1 again, and this becomes plus, so it makes it simpler. And if we multiply a to the power 4 plus a square, now we split this, so d, so we'll take 1 by a to the power 4 plus a square, we'll take out d sine ax minus sine ax by a to the power 4 plus a square. What is d sine ax? The derivative of sine ax, which is a cos ax. cut that, this becomes a cube plus a, this cancels, a cube cos ax by a cube plus a minus sin ax by a to the power 4 plus a square is the final answer. If you want to make it the same numerator, you can do that also. Just multiply this by a. So this is our final result. Very simple. Particular integral sin ax divided by g of d square comma d, where d square is equal to minus a square, d is not equal to minus a, d cube is not equal to minus a cube. You can only raise it to even powers. So you replace it, then do rationalization, you get the rationalization, then separate it, find the derivative of that cos or sine, whatever it is. If this was cos, then this would just change, it would just reverse. Now it is sine, so it became this. If it is cos, it is different, that's all. But it's the same property, but they must be isolated trigonometric, means it's sine ax or cos ax. So that's the rule. That's the second form. The third form is if f of x is equal to some power of x times some power of m. So if this is x times some power of m, then particular integral is equal to x to the power m by g of d. So here's what we do. Let's assume d is equal to, say, d cube minus d. Let's take this. So particular integral equal to this d cube minus d. So what we'll do now, we'll take x to the power m by d and we'll take reciprocate this. So what this becomes, d square minus 1 to the power minus 1, right? And this is d. So d square minus 1 to the power minus 1 is we can use binomial expansion. In binomial expansion, I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with what it means. 1 minus x to the power minus 1, 1 plus x to the power minus 1. So this is equal to, if you look at it, 1 plus x square, this one up till infinity. This one, 1 minus x plus x square minus x cube up till infinity. But we don't have to consider infinity terms, we only have to consider. So here's what we'll do, d we'll take out, so we'll get d square minus 1, then we'll take out negative 1, so negative 1, make this 1 minus d square, 1 minus d square, so it is 1 minus x. So it is like writing negative of x to the power m by d times 1 plus d square plus d power 4 blah blah blah. But what we do now, see, m, we cannot calculate this differential up till infinity. What we'll do, m x to the power m is differentiable m times. So if we multiply this out, see, now this is a particular integral, this thing here is our particular integral, right? If we multiply that out, let's do that, minus x to the power m by d, which means the integral, if it is reciprocal of d, it means integral, so minus integral x to the power m, let's take the minus out, plus, you can cancel because integral and differentiation cancels, so dx to the power m by dx, multiplying x to the power m times d square divided by d, plus d cubed x to the power m by d cubed x, means the third derivative, then the fifth derivative, and it goes till infinity. But m is a finite number and we can only differentiate m number of times. So that means if we differentiate, if m is equal to 4, then this is obviously equal to 0. So the maximum possible is only cubed, this 3. So like that, depending on what m is, we cut out whatever we have to cut out and we only solve the differentials of these, which are very simple. X to the power m, 3x, say if m was equal to 2, all we need to do is the differential of this. So it becomes minus x square, integral x square, which is minus x cube by 3 plus 2x, and that's all. So this is our particular integral. So whatever the value of m is, you curtail that binomial expansion only to that value and kill the other infinite terms and only solve for that. So that is our third form. Fourth form, f of x is equal to e power ax times v, where v is another function of x. Means if v is another function of x and it is times some exponential function, then we can solve the problem in the same manner we solved for just e power ax. We say particular integral is 1 by g of d plus a times v e to the power ax. That's our solution. And again d is equal to a. Same procedure as the form 1, but instead of just d, it is d plus a. That's all. And with that we are done with the four fundamental forms. But sometimes it is possible that you are given equation, say f of x equal to sin x cos x. Then this I have not described this form anywhere. So you have to use formulae to reduce sin x cos x into some sin ax. We know 2 sin x cos x is equal to sin 2x. So we rewrite this sin x cos x as sin 2x by 2, which can be solved. Remember, constant is always allowed. Some constant can always be added to this, no issues. So that is the thing. Now one more thing is, if we are given any function, f of x, which is a combination, a linear combination again of these four forms, means say we have 3 e to the power 4x plus sine 5x plus x to the power 3 plus cos 8x, something like this, some big function. Then we solve for each form independently, find their particular integral, find the particular integral of each form, and superimposition means we can add them. Find the particular integral number 1, particular integral number 2, number 3, number 4, and add them all. So that is our superposition principle, can be applied for undetermined coefficients, where you can just add the separated particular integrals together. So with that we are nearing the end of the lecture. Let me consider a small addendum. Since this is a quite a large lecture, let's have a summarization of some important formulae. The Wronskian of n functions is equal to y1 y1 y2 yn y1 dash y2 dash yn dash y1 to nth derivative y2 nth derivative yn nth derivative. This is the Wronskian. It is a determinant of this matrix. That is one formula to keep in mind. Second formula is variation of parameters for Walla formula. C1 is equal to negative integral y to x divided by Wronskian y1 comma y2. C2 of x is equal to negative y1 of x divided by y1 comma y2. There was a small error in here, using variation of parameters. No, yeah, using variation of parameters, finding the particular integral. C1 is not equal to this y1. No, it's not y1. If it was a second order derivative, it is y2. So y2 divided by Wronskian y1 comma y2 times f of x, means basically the next solution. C1 is equal to minus y2, C2 is equal to minus y1. So if Cn is equal to y1, Ck is equal to yn minus k, something like that. So we have to consider that it's not Ck and associated with yk. So that's an error which I made, sorry for that. This is how it is written. Okay, C1 is minus y2, so like that Ck is yn minus k. So some formulae to keep in mind. The formulae got cleared, so let me write them again. Wronskian. I've already written Wronskian. This is the Wronskian formula. Then I wrote the next one, C1 minus integral y2 f of x divided by Wronskian, C2 equal to minus integral y1 f of x divided by Wronskian. That is the variation of parameters formula. Then obviously you have to keep in mind the various forms. I have already explained them, so I won't write them again. The various forms for undetermined coefficients. Then you have to remember the substitution for Cauchy-Euler. That's it. Those are the formulae you have to keep in mind. With that, I will be ending today's lecture. Thank you and have a nice day.